Mike is a fast team lead representative. Mike holds an airline transport pilot certificate. He's a flight instructor, airplane single-engine, multi-engine, and helicopters. Advanced ground instructor. Mike was an aviation safety counselor in West North Carolina for many years. He relocated to Florida several years ago, and he now permanently resides in the Tampa Bay area. He helped us down in the Naples area for a long time. He was the chief of flight instructor at Europe American Aviation. He trained domestic and international students. He also provided the FAA in-dock training light twin refresher course down at the Naples airport. So that was a big program. So we'll go ahead and get started on this next phase.
We do a thorough pre-flight inspection of the aircraft, including weather, all of the things that you're taught to do, that the odds of you having a safe and successful flight will increase. Anytime you shortcut that process, anytime you become complacent with that process, the risk of you having an accident increases. I've been flying for quite a while, and one of the stories I like to tell students is I came down with a friend of mine who's an old-time pilot, designated pilot examiner, to Florida to pick up a Cessna 185 on floats. And I, at the time, didn't have my seaplane ready. So I really didn't understand what it took to pre-flight a seaplane. The first thing is, on a Cessna, the fuel tanks, you need to climb up on a ladder. 15 feet off the ground or something very high. So we come down to Florida and get with the owner of this aircraft. And they go around and put fuel in it and all that sort of thing. And we're walking out to the airplane. And I said to the pilot, the owner of the airplane, I said, did you pre-flight everything? Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're all ready to go. Oh, okay. And I climb in the back seat. And we take off. Everything's looking great. Sunny day in Florida. And I look out the window to my right, and there's fuel pouring off the top of the wing. There's like a waterfall. And I say on the intercom, hey, fellas, there's a bunch of fuel coming out this wing over here. I think we ought to go back. And as it turns out, the owner of the plane didn't take the time after the fuel person put the fuel in to just check to make sure the fuel caps were on the bloody thing. It was on the top of the wing, bouncing around on the chain. That's a silly thing to happen. But had we taken off, it could have been a disaster for us. And it was all because this person was rushed, maybe had a checklist and was simply looking at it, but not reading it, but not doing what it asked them to check. Right? So, on another time, I have a young man who's just got his commercial multi, and he's working for me. And he wants to build some time in a twin-engine airplane. So I said, okay, all of the trips that I take, at the time I had an Aero Command 685 twin-engine Aero Commander, I said, you come with me and you can fly and build some time. Okay. So we go to Memphis one day, and I was going there for a meeting, had a couple of folks in the back, and I said, okay, we're going to go for this meeting. You get the fuel in the plane and be ready to go. And I said, only put 100 gallons in this airplane. Don't put any more. Now, the 685 Aero Commander holds 322 gallons. And if you fill it up with 322 gallons, a 185-pound pilot puts it at max gross weight. It'll fly for 10 hours, but you don't get many people. And certainly I couldn't fly in it when it's full. So I told this young man, I said, only put 100 gallons in. Don't make sure they don't top it off, or they'll have to drain it out. Okay, so the day goes on, and it's 110 degrees in Memphis. We get back to the airport, it's 4:30 in the afternoon, hot as all get out. And I said, okay, we ready to go? Yep, everything's pre-flighted, boss. We're ready to go. So we all pile in the airplane, and I said, well, I'm going to be left seat on this one. You're right. I'll be PIC, we'll just go. So we're taxiing along, we get our clearance, and Memphis Tower says, hey fellas, there's a long line on the long runway. You want to take the short one? And as Kermit said, somebody was on my shoulder going, nah, you don't want to do that. Okay, so we'll just get in line behind all these big jets. So I tell this young man, I said, okay, we're next up. So there's a DC-9 in front of us. I said, now you watch where he rotates so we can miss the wake turbulence. Okay, we're cleared to take off and we're rolling down the runway. And at 685, it's, and I'm looking at the airspeed indicator and it's just barely moving. Kelly, something's really wrong here. We're going along more and more, and this plane's not speeding up. And so I said, hey, where did that DC-9 rotate? He said, oh, about 1,000 feet behind us. I said, uh-oh. We had now used 8,000 feet of runway, and we still hadn't reached takeoff speed, rotation speed. So I pull the power back, tell tower up, we're going to cancel and taxi back. So we get back to the FBO, and I said, we pull up there, they bring us in, open the doors, let everybody out, and I said to this young man, I said, how much fuel did we take? He said, well, boss, I only told them to put 100 gallons. I said, did you walk out there and see him? Did you look at the receipt? Well, no. They had filled this plane up. There was 322 gallons. We were over gross by 800 pounds or something. I mean, we wouldn't have taken off. We would have crashed. And why? Because this young man became complacent. Became complacent in the process. The fuelers always do the right job, right? It's 150 times this young man has flown. The fuelers had always put the right amount of fuel in. Always put the right type of fuel. With a 685, it looks like a 690. 690 is turbine power. 685 is half-gas power, gasoline power. So I've told this young man, when you fly the 685, make sure you're there with the fueler, because they might put jet fuel in this, mistaking it for a 690. Looks the same. My final story, all of those, we were lucky, right? Something intervened, we were lucky. This last one, I lived for years in western North Carolina in the mountains, and used to, as an aviation safety counselor, teach mountain climbing, things like that to flatlanders. At our mountain airport, the surrounding peaks are about 53 to 5,500 feet. In western North Carolina, we call them mountains. But they're pretty tall. And the airport's down in a valley, about 1,800 feet. So one evening, at VFR day, summertime, but in the evening it gets cloudy over the mountains, maybe a little bit of rain. So I go home, and I get a call from air traffic control that they had lost the pilot right in our general area. And could I go and check in the airport? That sort of thing. Well, I did, and no problem. Next morning we got up and started investigating. And unfortunately found the crash site about 3 miles from the airport. No fire, but the plane had just flew right into the ridge of the mountain. As it turns out, this was a VFR-only pilot, about 1,400 hours with his fiancée. And a beautiful VFR day, had taken off from Atlanta, no weather report. There were no charts found in the airport. No skills, had never been to the airport. And that night, there were scattered clouds. And I'm sure many of you know, on a dark, moonless night, you don't see clouds until you can't see anything. And he ended up dying. Simply because he didn't do a thorough pre-flight. So, that's sad. Why do these things happen? Why do we find ourselves complacent about pre-flight? Well, as a chief flight instructor for years, one of my jobs is to take a look at the quality of the training of students, and one, to do a check, like a check ride, but two, to actually check the quality of how my instructors are teaching. Here's some observations. This is on an end-of-course check. It's like a check ride at the FAA for private pilot. This young man is really great. Got 96 on his written test. Really a performer. We walk out to the airplane, and we're walking around, and he's got the checklist. Yeah. He's what's the word I'm looking, a robot. He's reading the checklist, saying it, but not doing it. He's just doing it like a robot, right? And we go around the whole plane, we get it, we get everything going. And I'm going to let this guy have all the rope he can, okay? And you're going to find out in a minute. So he does everything, starts everything up, gets ATIS, we're all ready to go, and starts the taxi, and the plane's not going anywhere. He said, brakes seem to be stuck. He's got the power on like that. So he said, I've got to shut this down. And turns out, he left the tail tied down. So, if you're doing a checklist and you have brand new students for a check ride forgetting to take and untie the tail, what else are they missing? Right? But it's not only with private pilots. Okay? I have an instrument, almost brand new instrument student. This guy's got 2,700 hours once they get his instrument ready. We again do this pre-flight. He gets the plane all untied, and we get in it, and we start the taxi. It's boom, boom, boom. Well, the right tire was flat. And when I saw it, it's not going to hurt. I want this to be a learning experience because this will stay with him forever. He won't make that mistake again. Right? Intensity. Okay, so my final one is a commercial student. This kid wants to go to the airline really bad. Okay? So we get in the plane, and I don't know why I don't pull circuit breakers, but there were 2 circuit breakers. This was at a Diamond area over on the co-pilot side. And there were 2 circuit breakers out when I got in the plane. And I'm watching a young man go through his cockpit check, and he says circuit breakers, and waves his hand over the circuit breaker. And there's 2 of them popped out. It wasn't that he ran his hand over, he just waved his hand, he goes, circuit breakers in, and goes on to the next thing. And there's 2 circuit breakers completely popped out. One happened to be the flaps. I don't know how they got there, but one happened to be the flaps. So then he gets where he's checking the flaps, and they're not going down. He says, flaps check, and he pushes the handle down, no lights come on, and the flaps don't go down. He says, full down, and clicks it back up and says, okay, full up, and he's ready to go. And I said, okay, we're done. You know, let's go get your instructor and have a chat about this. It was the most amazing thing that I've seen, okay? So why do we have people dying in accidents and incidents because of issues with pre-flight? Is because their instructors didn't do a good job teaching the importance of a pre-flight. It's silly. So, do we have any instructors here? Go ahead, come on, raise your hands. Yeah. When you go with your students, particularly new ones, don't say, oh, it's okay, it's always like that, don't worry about it. Right? If there's an issue with the airplane, make sure you teach the student that those issues are important. Don't skip over them. And I know it's kind of, you always want to sit in there and have that cup of coffee while the student's out there pre-flighting. Go out there and check that he's really pre-flighting and doesn't get into bad habits. So just to finalize, in closing, complacency during the pre-flight will and can kill you. And it's a simple thing to just take the time and do it right. And please, be mentors to other people at the airport and make them do it. Talk to them about it. Okay, thank you.